So I'm Isabel Carlisle. I'm a co-founder of the Bioregional Learning Centre, together with my colleague Jane Brady, who's currently in Italy pruning olive trees, and Bridie Kennelly, who we're very pleased to say has just joined our team. And Bridie is going to be leading this the project work on our adaptation strategy. And we're very happy to say that Southams District Council has agreed or has funded us to do this first year of work. And the first year of work is really setting the scene and doing all the groundwork for what we hope will be a 4-year project. So we have been working, Bioregional Learning Centre has been working on what we used to call climate resilience, but we're now calling more and more climate adaptation for the last 7 years. And in 2019, in September 2019, we led a climate resilience learning journey around South Devon. And the image that you can see there on the right-hand side is from the Slapton Line Partnership. So any of you who know about the Slapton Line Partnership, which is obviously on our south coast around Slapton, knows that they, for several years, were working into what it would mean to retreat from the sea or accept that their road would be swallowed up by the sea, and the kind of process that a community could hopefully generatively go through in order to come to terms with dramatic climate change. I think that may have been put slightly on hold by our MP, Anthony Mangnall, who now says he may have found funding in order to rebuild the road at some point in the future. But the work that they did at Slapton Line, I think, could be incredibly useful and informative for all of us, because that community went through a whole process of denial, rage, and despair before coming out the other side into accepting the inevitability of greater storms more frequently washing their road away. So we are building on all the knowledge that we gained through doing that learning journey, and we are going to be offering a learning journey for all of you and for Southams District Councillors and for town councillors and parish councillors and hopefully some people from Devon County Council as well in the first week of June. And what we're doing here with this evening is really preparation work for that, to consult with all of you as to what you think we should go and look at, what you'd like us to look at. So what is climate adaptation? It's different from climate mitigation. And you can see there on the right-hand side, there are the definitions that the Worldwide Fund for Nature has provided us about climate change mitigation and climate change adaptation. So mitigation is much more about zero emissions and trying to make the situation less worse than it might be, less bad. And adaptation means fundamentally altering our behavior systems and in some cases our ways of life. So adaptation is quite radical. It's quite hard to get our heads around how we might do this. And yet this is where we find ourselves. So we're going to be addressing ourselves to that and thinking about, well, what skills do we have? What resources do we have to address that crisis with? So Bioregional Learning Centre thinks in systems. A lot of the work we do is at landscape and system scale. And we talk about geosystems on the move. We'll go into that in a minute by what we mean by the huge forces that have always shaped our planet. But we're now accelerating that natural dynamic. And as Jane said at the beginning, we have seriously gone over 1.5 degrees. We're over 400 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And we are entering an unknown territory, basically. And it's not a case, adaptation is not a case of looking to governments or technology companies to kind of solve these issues. It's going to take all of us working together. This is about how we respond as communities. So this is this next slide. So I'm taking you on a bit of a journey back through time to really make the point that our planet has always changed. And this amazing picture there on the screen is an image that was created by Imperial College London back in 2017. And this is a view of what was called the land bridge that connected France to England. So we've got a view here, but sitting in Calais, looking across to the white cliffs of Dover, somewhere in the very far distance. And we've got this enormous kind of ridge of chalk that's running across the channel. So this is before the English Channel was created. It's 450,000 years ago. On the right, you've got a huge lake into which the Rhine and the Meuse and the Thames are draining. And you've got all the meltwater from glaciers as well. It's a freshwater lake, which is dammed somewhere up in the region of Norfolk, somewhere like that, all the way across the North Sea. And on the left, you've got a kind of a floodplain, or you've got all these waterfalls. So you can see huge amounts of water cascading off the land bridge. And they know that this was a thing because they found huge plunge pools 150 meters deep in the floor of the English Channel. So they know that there were huge waterfalls that made these plunge pools. And over the land bridge, there were different life forms traveling backwards and forwards. But at some point, 450,000 years ago or just after, the whole land bridge completely collapsed. And that was when the English Channel came into being. So here we are with our next slide. So Neanderthals, I lived an extremely long time. I'm a great fan of Neanderthals because I used to be an archaeologist and worked on a Neanderthal site in Jersey. And Neanderthals culture lasted for about 350,000 years. They kind of disappeared about 50,000 years ago. There's evidence in Kent's Cavern that they interbred with Homo sapiens, so they weren't just wiped out. But they lived over these vast landscapes. They moved with the ice sheets. They went south when the ice came down from the north, and they retreated back up again when the ice receded. And they were very good at working with systems. They knew where to find all the various resources they needed for their existence. So geosystems on the move. So geosystems on the move, what do we mean by that? Gaia on the move. We kind of have a kind of shorthand description as to what we mean. So this, some of you will know, are the analyses from the Stockholm Resilience Centre. And they have been looking at what they call planetary boundaries since 2009. I'm sorry, the slide isn't more clear, but we are producing a resource sheet that we will share with all of you. And the link to this planetary boundaries work will be on that resource sheet. But just to look at 2023, you've got top right, you've got this kind of big wedge of orange where you've got novel entities. So novel entities has been properly measured for the first time. And this means combinations of chemicals or different elements that are combining in new ways and often in highly toxic ways and are polluting our environment. But you've also got things like climate change, which is top left. You've got biosphere integrity, which is kind of like at, it would be kind of west-northwest, I imagine. And then at the bottom, you've got this overshoot as well with biogeochemical flows, and that's mainly phosphates and nitrates. But anyway, we can go into that in more detail another time, but this is just showing you there is a progression, and we're going over the boundaries of our life support systems. This is a slide which is showing the research that's coming out of Exeter University, particularly from the Global Systems Institute, which is run by Professor Tim Lenton. These are the geosystems that we refer to, which are huge. They are what controls the jet stream, what controls the Gulf Stream, what controls the temperature circulation around our planet. So we have all sorts of things like ice sheets melting. We've got boreal forest dieback and permafrost collapse. We've got Greenland ice sheet collapse. We've got the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, which is taking heat from South America and the tropics all the way up to where we live, which is slowing down quite significantly. We've got Amazon rainforest dieback. And of course, all the changes and the tipping that's going on in all these geosystems, it's also combining in unpredictable ways. So we have absolutely kind of no idea what really is going to happen next. So there's lots of climate modeling going on, but as to the impacts it'll have on us, it's not really clear. But there are also positive tipping points. So the work of Professor Tim Lenton is about proposed interventions and positive tipping points, which are levers for social change. So you can read there what has been identified as these leaders, and you can see bottom right, we put learning that leads to agency. So really that is the tipping point the Bioregional Learning Centre works into, and that is what all the work that we're doing with adaptation in the South Hams is about. So now it's Bridie's turn to speak. Bridie, since I've got control of the slide, you're going to have to tell me when to move on.
Yes, I will do. So the climate adaptation strategy for the Devon, Cornwall and Isles of Scilly came out recently. There was a consultation that I think we sent round a few months ago, so that was incorporated as well. But essentially it assesses the climate change risk and opportunity assessment, and then it looks at where we move forward with that. So if you want to read the full thing, you can just search that on Google and you'll find a website where you can either read the massive PDF document or you can find some really nice sort of quick read sections, which I think are really nicely written and make a lot of sense. So I would suggest if you'd like some more detail on it, you head over there after this and enjoy reading. So the first section of the strategy is the climate change risk and opportunity assessment. And within that, they divide up the risks and opportunities into 5 key impact themes. So they are river and surface water flooding, sea level rise, leading to coastal flooding and erosion, reduced water availability, leading to drought conditions, temperature change and extreme heat and cold, and then cascading impacts, which sounds a bit vague and is maybe slightly vague, but it's sort of the idea of several hazards that come together or that trigger each other in maybe slightly unpredictable ways. Could you go to the next slide, please, Isabel? Brilliant, thank you. So within the strategy, there is a strategic adaptation plan, which looks at plans over the next 5 years. And then there's also an action plan, which looks at short-term things that we can get going with within the next 2 to 3 years. Again, I'd really suggest, if you're interested, go and have a look. There's some really nice kind of tangible points to look at there. And they divide it into both levels and sectors. So the levels look at who might enact these changes. So we've got a policy regulator level, an organizational level, a community level, and an individual level. And what's, I think, quite interesting, maybe for a lot of the people on this call, is that that policy regulator level actually doesn't have a ton of things attached to it. The organizational level and the sort of opportunities for community groups have a lot more things they can do. There's actually a lot more sort of active planning, preparation, decision making that can be made at a sort of community level and a citizen level. So I think that's really interesting and hopefully quite empowering, considering the topic. And then the sectors are divided into the natural environment, so looking at habitats, species, also the sort of benefits of the natural environment to people. Infrastructure, so that covers a very wide range of things. It might cover our sewage systems, buildings, planning regulations, things like that. We've got business and industry, looking at how we prepare businesses and industries for the possible effects. Health and the built environment, and I'll come back to these a bit later. And then the cross-cutting risks and the international dimensions, so thinking about things that might cover lots of topics or might come into a sort of wider scale picture. Can you go to the next page, please? Thank you. So we've picked 5 themes that we're currently sort of working at the level of, that we think cover maybe sort of some of the central topics of climate adaptation in the South Hams, what we might be looking at specifically. Obviously, a lot of them will overlap, cross-cut, so there'll be lots of things or sort of planning that we can do or preparation we can do that really links into all of these different themes. But our first theme is on human health. So we've got lots of health impact areas. Some of the more obvious ones are things like extreme temperatures, heat stroke, getting very cold, things like that, flooding, food and waterborne diseases, risks to the health service, and also the mental health effects of climate change itself, and then the effects of climate change, which I think is something that can get sort of forgotten about occasionally. So it's really good to bear in mind. And I've just listed a few possible areas of resilience. We're hoping you'll have a lot of thoughts on these as well. But for health, we're thinking increased community awareness, warm and cool spaces. So you'll see here I've put the South Hams map, the South Hams District Council map of warm spaces that they're aware of. But yeah, cool spaces as well definitely is going to be, I think, something that we want to consider. Supporting with insulation and energy, readiness for flooding and coastal change, and then green spaces for mental health. So that's just a few examples. Isabel, could you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. Our second theme is food. I think this one is quite a key one, particularly considering we're living in an area that's rural, agricultural. It's something that I think is in a lot of people's minds. So some of the impact areas there are around soil health. We've got impacts on fisheries. We've got the effects of changing climate on agriculture. Veterinary health, very hot temperatures, for example, might have really significant effects on livestock who might really struggle to be out in fields in the middle of summer. And then things like agricultural pests, pathogens, diseases. And some of the possible areas of resilience here, I've listed supporting healthy soils. So some of you might have joined us on the Sustainable South Hams field trip last year to the Apricot Centre, where they were looking at sort of soil health and soil restoration. So there's lots of people looking at options around that. One area of resilience is considering that some species, in terms of like forestry and planting and other forms of agriculture, some species might actually thrive under our new climate conditions. Do we look at perhaps non-native species that would do well in a new climate condition? And then the industry readiness, the business resilience, which I think links in a lot to some of the other work that Sustainable South Hams has been doing with South Hams District Council around the Keep It Local project, thinking on how those organisations link together, connect to each other for increased resilience, and a sort of general focus on regional food security and how we want to think about that. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the third one is water. As you'll have seen from those themes earlier on, water was 3 out of the 5 sort of high-level topics in the DCIOS climate strategy. So it's clearly something quite key. The impact areas include things like increased winter rainfall, storm events, river and surface water flooding, sea level rise, leading to coastal flooding and erosion, but then equally on the other side of things, reduced water availability. So we've got possible areas of resilience looking at infrastructure resilience through local stewardship. How are we looking after our own water infrastructure? Flood plans, and I've put the Environment Agency flood warnings. Buckfast are signed up to those, and I suspect some other communities as well. There's opportunities for really planning there, thinking forward, making a strategy for your own community if they're at risk of flooding. Managing the landscape, rainwater collection, porous driveway surfaces, and then I can't actually see my last one, but I know there's a last one. Can anyone read it?
It says reduce water use.
There we go. So there's quite a few individual opportunities there as well, which is something that might be really good in terms of talking about how we're engaging with communities to talk about individual sort of actions that can be taken. Yes, next slide, please. So local environment is one that I think a lot of you will be maybe most familiar with or very familiar with, because I think a lot of the community groups in the South Hams are already doing a lot of work around local environment. So the local environment impact areas, we've got risks to, there's a few ones about marine here because they're higher up on the sort of priority list. They're more likely to be affected in the nearer term. So marine habitats, marine and coastal species, but also terrestrial habitats and species as well. Natural carbon stores, habitats in general changing and altering, and also people's enjoyment of nature as it is affected by climate change. And some of the possible areas of resilience there, we've got community engagement and knowledge sharing, which again, lots of you are involved with. Nature enhancement of all sorts. Strategic planting of things like trees and wildflowers, you know, in the right place at the right time. Habitat restoration. And then sort of nature-based solutions. How can we think about our work towards nature as also benefiting in a broader scheme? Next slide, please. And then our final theme is energy and technology, which is quite broad. The impact areas that we've got at the moment include things like an increased energy demand due to temperature, whether it's heating or cooling our buildings, a need for appropriate local infrastructure, and the availability of technology and equipment trying to reduce our consumption. So some possible areas of resilience are reducing energy consumption. So again, that's something we can support on an individual level, at business level, at community level. Possibilities around renewable energy. We've got organisations in the South Hams, community energy societies, lots of advice around insulation, around renewable energies, appropriate housing interventions for temperatures. Again, that's things that are supporting mostly to do with temperature. Local infrastructure strategies. I popped this one in because while I was sort of looking at the Buckfastleigh flood preparation, I also came across, remembered that Buckfastleigh has a nice green infrastructure strategy, which actually covered a lot of the topics that we're talking about tonight. So there's a really nice possibility there for sort of parish councils to look at how they are planning for the infrastructure in this context. And then support to share and repair technology and equipment. We've got things like share sheds, repair cafes, pop-up repair sort of days, things like that, which is all a really key part of considering how we're going to continue being able to use technology, tools, equipment without continuing to consume. Yeah, so that's our 5. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bridie. So our next steps are co-designing the learning journey, and we'd love your input in the breakout rooms in a few minutes. The learning journey will be the first week in June, and you'll all get circulated with the information. We expect to be taking around 30 people each day over 5 days to different parts of the South Ham to look at different issues and different responses, and just kind of see in action what people are already doing, but also what the challenges are. And then we'll have an exhibition from early September, kind of traveling exhibition. Either it will be online or it will be kind of a real exhibition that you can put up in your local church or your village hall, or a combination of the two. So more information on that coming soon. And long term, we want to focus on supporting demonstrator projects. So people who are showing how adaptation can be done in multiple different ways around the South Hams. We would like to be able to resource them in some way. And we also would like to see a learning network come into being so that we're able to share all our information and learnings and our responses and resources and all of those things, because the more connected we are, the more resilient we are as well. We would love people to just verbally report back from their breakout rooms with, you know, 1 or 2 headlines. And then we thought we'd have a general discussion about where we would like to see this work going, because we are very keen to get a steer from all of you as to how to shape the learning journey so it's of maximum value to us all. Anyone like to feedback on human health? What were the kind of headlines from human health? That was Rosa, wasn't it, who was facilitating that one?
Yes, I think in both the discussions, there was quite a lot of chat around diseases coming, like insects, malaria. Is our housing infrastructure going to be kind of ready for things like malaria, if that might be on its way? And what is the tipping point? So one of the things that we'd quite like to find out is there any kind of research that's been done? Is this knowledge out there about where's the sort of temperature tipping point where we might see these infectious diseases kind of migrating to our climate and to our region?
Interesting. So no examples of that yet, I don't think. Although we could say that COVID was a kind of zoonotic disease, possibly. Okay, so moving on.
Oh, I was just going to say
Yes.
on the disease front, the ticks, as you know, we all know about the Lyme disease, but now ticks are carrying a new bacteria, spreading out to the New Forest area, and it's like not just like Lyme disease, no cure. In the States where I'm from, if you get an insect bite from a tick, you can send the tick itself to a center where they test it to see if it has the bacteria that will give you the Lyme disease. And I think it would be very interesting if we could set up something like that in this country where you can take often, because the tick is always attached to you. There's no problem. It's not like a mosquito that flies away. So you can put it in an envelope and send it off. But yeah, so there are certainly diseases already coming in. And of course, we've got the Asian hornet, but there are bird flu, you know, yeah. But yeah, so the ticks, and that poses a threat, you know, to human health and as well as your pets and other animals.
I think the ticks one is a very, very good idea, because we do have on the coastal areas, we do have quite a big issue, because we have deer on the coast and we have sheep on the coast, and we've always had ticks for years and years and years. So, you know, that's an interesting one to take up with the School of Tropical Medicine or whoever.
Yes. I mean, I probably average about, I mean, last summer I probably had at least 24, 25 tick bites. And also the other thing, the other animal that brings ticks in are the pheasants. So they are often not mentioned, but they bring a lot of ticks in as well.
Interesting, right.
Mm-hmm.
Pheasants that are raised for shoots.
Yes.
Pheasants.
Yes, non-native birds raised for shoots.
Yeah,
Oh,
we
thank you for that.
there's huge pheasants on, for example, the Avon, because of the shoot. Huge numbers of pheasants. So it could be one worth sort of exploring. Probably be interesting to take it up with Plymouth or Exeter Hospital.
It would.
Yes.
Because they're both
yes.
they're both teaching hospitals.
That's a really good suggestion. I think we will definitely weave that into the learning journey somehow. So now we're moving on to food.
Can I just pick up about pheasants? It may be a nice bridging thing, actually, if there's anybody that eats them. I don't, but there's less shooting going on around, and so we sometimes have 15 female pheasants in what is quite a small garden in the morning, and one male. So what I'm saying is that they have gone feral, and that I mean, that's obviously happening in places, but there's maybe a question of what to do about that, and one of them might be just to deal with them oneself. No, I don't know, but there's a question.
Buggers.
And if you eat them, that's what I said. But there may be, something to think about in that regard.
Brilliant.
Okay, moving on because we've only got 5 minutes left.
Okay.
Jane, can you
Yeah.
report back on food? Thank you.
Really interesting conversation, lots of subjects covered. The thing that struck me that I take from that room was we will be like Portugal.
In what way?
So the heat, the anticipation is that we'd be like Portugal. So look at what grows in Portugal and think of what we would lose, but also think of what we would gain. So that was a rich conversation. Some examples of specific places that might be interesting to build into a learning journey as well.
Thank you very much on that one. Anything else on food, or was that it?
Well, there's lots, but
those are the headlines. Perfect. Let's
that-
keep going. Water. So we had a really interesting discussion in the water room about flooding, but also what happens if we have a drought and run out of water. How can we reduce our use of water? A lot of conversation about both rainwater collection and how we can create more porous driveway surfaces. So thinking about increased rainfall, there's obviously more runoff if we have all our gardens paved for parking our cars outside. So we're thinking about not major changes here, but kind of changes that individual households could do without huge amounts of financial investment or disturbance. People were noticing winds getting stronger, houses on the coast taking more of a battering, losing roof tiles, all of that. So we're seeing big changes, but we're most concerned, I think, about flooding. Too much water rather than too little at the moment. So those really are the headlines. I mean, if anyone wants this shared with them, we're very happy to do that once we've tidied the whole document up. So now natural environment. That's Bridie.
Yes, hello. Yeah, so we covered quite a lot of topics across it. So, but in terms of sort of experiences of climate change, things like seeing fewer insects, and also commented on sort of when you're reading older books like Thomas Hardy, and they talk about, hearing insects all night, and that clearly being very different in terms of visible changes. Also about the changing weather patterns being very obvious, and a bit about zoonotic diseases. We actually said sort of avian flu for seabirds, things like that. In terms of knowing more about climate adaptation, there was a lot that came up, but sort of things around using nature to support itself, the rewilding, the regenerative agriculture, the opportunities there. A bit about sort of access and enjoyment around like Dartmoor National Park, around that sort of people engaging with the environment side of things. We talked a bit about sort of the blue carbon habitats, seagrass habitats, kelp habitats, and the sort of possible work around how marine infrastructure can affect that. And then a little bit about how local authorities are going to look at adaptation, how we put changes in place for the long haul. And then a little bit around the changes in the bigger system, and also the impacts of sort of tourism and second homes on the need to build resilient communities in order to effectively have local climate adaptation. Yeah, it's quite wide-ranging.
Very good. Yeah, tourism came up in water as well. Suna, energy and technology.
So yeah, we thought probably there was the idea that raised that we hadn't perhaps experienced as many extreme effects in terms of weather as further inland into the country. People had noticed that the winters had got warmer, and that there was definitely more rain. And flooding was, of course, brought up, and landslides, and homes getting more repeatedly flooding on floodplains, but then they are called floodplains for a reason. In terms of what people would like to know more, there was a sort of general comment that sometimes you can combine mitigation and adaptation, and sometimes you can't. Like insulating a building might be combining the two, but dealing with floodwater might not. I'd quite like to see, I think it exists, a very simple single-page summary of the likely temperatures and rainfalls and various different scenarios for different dates, so that we can take that as a parish council and go, all right, what's it going to be like in 2030? without there being a great big report around it.
Mm.
We mentioned different approaches were needed in built up areas to rural areas. They can very easily overheat, for example. There was a probable conflict between planning permission, national planning permission, more local planning permission, and what actually favoured the environment or climate or social needs, and that there was a resistance there was a social resistance to change locally. That whether that had an actual impact on planning or not, or both, that's probably something to work on, because it creates a social environment that doesn't encourage change. In terms of projects to visit, we noted that the South Hams probably hasn't had as many changes as somewhere more built up, further up country, perhaps. We haven't had a rollout of electric vehicles everywhere, really. For example, there's various properties where you can go, where you can visit a heat pump, for example, which is a project that hopefully the Sustainable South Hams Energy Group is going to pick up on, I think. The notion of visiting retrofit properties that do exist and new build properties that are built sustainably, transition homes. They have their open homes project, and then various renewable energy projects and repair cafes that could be visited.
Very good.
Yeah,
Thank you very much, everyone. Really grateful for all your ideas, and this is so valuable for us. Thank you.